All right, friends, grab a snack, get comfy. I feel like this is going to be a really long video. Hi friends, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. I know it has been a really long time since I've uploaded a video because I'm the worst and I suck. I don't know what it's been this year, but I've just had the hardest time finding motivation to film. Like, I really want to, and I want to be consistent on my channel, and I want to upload content for you guys, but I'm just finding it really hard to find the motivation to actually like put on makeup, do my hair, and sit down and film. So here we are. It's been a little while. Hi, welcome. If you're new, I'm Jordan. If you're not new, hi, I'm still Jordan. I hope that not everybody has left my channel when I uploaded this video because YouTube does that kind of thing. Basically, what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be telling you all of the books that I have read in the last 3 months. I typically like to do a monthly wrap up for each month, but I haven't done one for April, May, or June. I read some really great books throughout the months that I really want to share with you guys. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of books in this video. I have been reading quite a bit this year. That's one thing that is like a trade-off for not filming and editing, is that you have a lot more time for reading because you're not spending time on the computer or sitting in front of your camera. I digress. There are a lot of books to talk about today. I got a blanket. I'm a little cozy and comfy. I'm wearing like a comfy t-shirt. It's all cool. And we're gonna just talk about the books that I've read. Chill, casual, comfortable. Let's just dive right on in and let's talk about the books that I read in April. So the first book that I read was The Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston. I actually received this as an e-arc from NetGalley. However, since then it has come out. This is a companion novel to Geekerella. This one is a Prince and the Pauper retelling about these two ladies. One is a fangirl of this show called Starfield, and one is the lead actress in the Starfield franchise, and they look very much alike, and there comes up a situation where they have to swap places. I really enjoyed this one. Geekerella is one of my favorite books that I read a few years ago, and so I was highly anticipating this book. However, I didn't love it quite as much as Geekerella. I'm much more familiar with the Cinderella story. I don't know too much about The Prince and the Pauper, so I couldn't pick out like all the special little nuances that I could with Geekerella, and I also just really loved the romance and like the fan aspect in Geekerella. I feel like The Princess and the Fangirl can focus a little too heavily on the negative aspects of a fandom and the negative things that come along with being a part of a fandom, which are all very true and all very relevant. I did enjoy both of the romances in this book. We do have a female-female romance. They are very fast-paced and very insta-lovey. I wasn't too bothered by it, and I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Waking Gods by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the second book in the Themis Files trilogy. I listened to them on audiobook pretty much back to back, and I have the same feelings for all 3 of them across the board. I listened to them in a row, so I can't really differentiate the different storylines as well as I could have probably 3 months ago, but I really enjoyed this story. This is a science fiction adult trilogy that I would say is really good for fans of Illuminae. We follow a young girl who one day falls into a hole and discovers a metal hand. Fast forward several years and she's given the opportunity to study the metal hand at the university that she works at. They've since found several other large metal body pieces. This incredible government conspiracy dossier style, very much like Illuminae, and I think this is the one in the trilogy that made me cry. They were all fantastic audiobooks and I loved them so much, and I gave Waking Gods a 5 out of 5 stars. And then let's just go ahead and talk about Only Human as well, because like I mentioned, I can't really differentiate them at this point. It's been so long, but they have been some of my favorite things I've read so far this year. I really loved them. They were, like I said, fantastic audiobooks. I loved the relationship dynamic between the father and the daughter a lot in the 3rd book. It's really one of the largest relationship dynamics that you see, and I also really loved the relationship between 2 of the main characters. I really loved their dynamic. I loved this whole trilogy. It's definitely going to be on my best books of the year, and I gave both Waking Gods and Only Human 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Wicked King by Holly Black, which is the sequel to The Cruel Prince, which kind of blew up BookTube last year. This is a YA fantasy story about fairies. These 2 twins whose parents in the mortal realm were brutally murdered by a fairy, and then they were whisked away to fairyland and raised by fairies in the fairy court. They don't really fit in the fairy court being human, and they desperately want to find a place. And we follow Jude as she desperately tries to find her way in the fairy court, and she's willing to kind of do whatever it takes to make a name for herself. I didn't really much care for the Cruel Prince, and I really didn't care for the Wicked King either. I don't know what it is about this series, but I just don't love it as much as everybody else does. I don't have like that connection to it. I don't really care for Jude and Cardan. I can't put my finger on what is about the series that I just don't like, but I can't connect to it the way that I want to, or the way that I feel like I should be considering my reading tastes. So it's really just kind of been a bust for me, and I haven't enjoyed it so far. I still will read the third book because it's only a trilogy, but like I just don't particularly care. I have heard that it takes place in the same realm as The Darkest Part of the Forest and her Tithe series, which I didn't know, which is super cool. So if you're a person who likes books across many different series that all take place in the same world, which I do, then I think you'd really like this. But I don't have interest in reading the other books because I haven't enjoyed these books particularly, and unfortunately I gave The Wicked King a 2.75 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Wrong to Need You by Alicia Rai. This is the second book in the Forbidden Hearts series. I read the first book last winter for Smutathon. This is an adult romance trilogy about romance tropes, kind of like each love story kind of focuses on a different trope. So the first book was like a hate to love romance, and this one was more friends to lovers romance. We follow two characters who were friends as children and they grew up together. Main female protagonist ended up marrying the main male protagonist's older brother. However, he died in a tragic accident, and so she is brought closer to younger brother many years later when he comes back into town, and they strike up a romance, a little, you know, forbidden. I found the relationship to be super sweet. Sadia and Paul have a young son together, which is Jackson's nephew, and just watching him develop a relationship with his nephew and the dynamic of the three of them together, it was just precious and really sweet, and I really enjoyed this just as much as I enjoyed the first one, and I'm going to be reading the third book very soon, and I end up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read, I actually listened to an audiobook, and it was one of my favorite books of the year so far, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was a phenomenal audiobook. It was a full cast narration. We follow this band, the Six, when they're at the height of their fame. They are put with Daisy Jones, who is a singer-songwriter, to help spark them and catapult them into like that last stratosphere of celebrity status. The band doesn't really work well with Daisy, and there's a lot of clashing between her and the lead singer, and it's basically them learning how to work together to create a cohesive album and mutually help each other out to get to the places they want to be in the music industry, and ultimately what causes the band to break up at the height of their power. And I love this. I love the dynamic between Daisy and Billy, the two like main leads, and then Billy's relationship with Camilla. And then my favorite character was Karen and Graham. I loved Karen and Graham's relationship. It's told in interview format, and it was just very compelling to hear the same story told from one bandmate's point of view, and then to switch to like the interview with a different bandmate and hear it explained from their point of view, and like have a totally different outlook on how the situation was. Daisy Jones is such a compelling and troubled and heartbreaking main character. Her relationship with Billy was incredible, and I absolutely adored this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was like utter perfection. I feel like the audiobook is the absolute way to go. The narration is just spot on. Karen is voiced by a very popular actress whose name is slipping my mind right now, and I think January Lavoie is also in this audiobook, and she's a narrator of The Diviners, and she's fantastic. So all in all reasons to listen to the audiobook for this one. And the final book that I read in April was Again But Better by Christine Riccio, who is a very well known, very well beloved booktuber. She kind of paved the way for booktube as it is, and I received a copy of her book as an e-arc via NetGalley. I have very mixed feelings on this book. Again, but better is very uncomfortable to read if you've ever interacted with Christine or ever watched one of her videos. It is so entrenched in Christine. Main character Shane feels like Christine. A lot of the things that happen to her main character are things that Christine has talked about in her videos as being experiences that she went through. And I know that authors pull on their own experiences when they write books, especially their debut. Voice is just like all over the book, and it made it feel like I was reading her diary in a way, and it made me a little uncomfortable. I didn't really know how to feel about certain things because I kept thinking, is this something that Christine actually did, or is this just something that Shane in the book is doing? And I had a really hard time separating Shane from Christine. Overall, I found like the story and the plot to be very engaging. The writing was really easy to read. I didn't have a hard time like getting through it. I just was a little uncomfortable. Our main character Shane, who is in college, and she's really struggling with a college experience, and so she decided to travel abroad to London to find herself and to redo college, and she ends up meeting this boy that she falls for. There is some like gray area cheating in this book that made me a little like, I don't know how I feel about that. Someone who's never ever heard of Christine before, has never watched one of her YouTube videos, will absolutely love this book. I feel like it will connect and resonate with so many people because college is such a hard experience and so many people feel so alone in college. I felt so alone in college. So reading this, I can definitely see an outsider really connecting to this and being seen and having an impactful reading experience. I gave it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. So now that we're done talking about that very uncomfortable review of a fellow booktuber's book that makes me very uncomfortable, let's go ahead and talk about the books that I read in May. The first one I read was The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi, which is her new YA historical fantasy series about this group of ragtag band of friends who are on this quest for this ancient artifact. Do you hear my cat in the litter box? I am so sorry. This was a really hard book for me to initially get into because there's a lot of world building, a lot of weird words, a lot of made up words that are all part of the mythology and the lore of the story. But once I got into it, I was obsessed with this book. This is one of my favorite books of the year so far. Like I said, we follow this character who is part of a secret society that has to do with the ruling founding families of the world, and his house has been taken away. He's trying to regain his house, regain his power and his seat in this society. So he has to steal an artifact which catapults him on this crazy wild adventure. It's like this National Treasure historical fiction mummy hybrid situation. It's a lot of things that I love, and I did love it. I loved the characters. I loved the relationship between the main male and female protagonist. Could you stop? How long does it take to use the bathroom, dude? Thank you. As I was saying, The Gilded Wolves is one of my favorite books of the year, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I listened to, an audiobook, I don't know why I chose to listen to this. I listened to We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, which is a book I have owned for years and never read. It was terrible, so there's that. It's about this girl who goes to this private island that her family owns every summer with all of her cousins, and one of the cousins brings this boy, and her and this boy develop a relationship, and we follow them going to this island for several summers in a row. And then one summer an event happens and our main character has amnesia and she can't remember the event. Like a mystery of what the event was, what transpired, how the main character is involved in it, what the ramifications were, and it's told in like back and forth storylines. The biggest issue I had with this book was reveal of the mystery happened, and then there was so much resolution after the reveal. There was about as much pre-reveal as there was post-reveal, and it dragged the story on for what felt like ever. It just like kept going, and we kept delving more into the main character's psyche and her past and her decisions, and it just didn't feel like there needed to be this much like explanation as to why the events that transpired. Like, I feel like there could have been so much of that cut out and it could have ended so much sooner, and it's a really short book. And it would have like added more mystery, more mystique, more like suspense to the novel. I don't know. It's really a book that I really could have passed on, and I could have totally DNF'd. I don't know why I didn't. I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. 3 is probably quite generous, but I finished the whole thing and I didn't outright hate it. The next book I started was From Twinkle with Love by Cynthia Menon, and this I was listening to on audiobook, and I decided to DNF it about 30% of the way through. It's written in a letter format, so the main character, Twinkle, is writing to all of her favorite female filmmakers. She also is into photography and filmmaking, and so she's writing in a diary to these women. It felt like a 30, 40-year-old woman trying to write like a teen. Twinkle used a lot of words and phrases that were super popular in like the 80s and 90s, and for being a modern story that takes place today, it felt really out of place. It felt like the author was using phrases that she was comfortable with from when she was a teen. It made it feel like I was reading a adult's diary if she was trying to be a teenager. I do want to try this book again, but I really think I have to read it with my eyes and not listen to it with my ears, because it just like really accentuated the weird teen voice that Cynthia was using for Twinkle, and it was really off-putting. I didn't jive with it, so hopefully I can come back to this in the future, but for now this is a DNF. The next book I read was Only a Breath Apart by Katie McGarry. This is the same author that wrote the motorcycle biker club books that I read last year called Thunder Road, which I absolutely loved and adored. This is her new book that came out this year, and this was a beautiful, heart-wrenching, sad story about 2 characters who are dealing with abuse in different ways. They're both coming from abusive homes, and they are childhood friends that lost touch early in high school. The main male character, Jessie, was starting to make fun, I believe her name is Scarlett, and it ended up dissolving their friendship. They come together again later in high school as a result of some things that are going on in Scarlett's personal life. Jessie decides to reach out and help her because he has been through similar things when he was a child, and it's just these 2 characters reconnecting and reestablishing their friendship several years later, learning to grieve together and heal together, and both dealing with the trials and tribulations of abuse. It was really heartbreaking and really sad, and definitely trigger warning for abuse. I thought it was a tender, beautiful, innocent story of these 2 characters who are dealing with a lot of very adult things at a very young age and learning to lean on each other and grow through it, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very moving novel. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy it. And the last book that I read in May was Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren. I'm almost made my way through their entire back catalog. I think the only thing I haven't read from Christina Lauren is the Beautiful Bastard series, which is a fan fiction of Twilight. But this takes place in the Hollywood filmmaking industry. We have 2 main characters who are agents for competing agencies, film agencies, I don't know. They meet each other at a party, they hit it off, they really, really like each other, things are going really good, and then they show up at work one day and surprise, one's company has bought the other, and they are now co-workers vying for all of the same clients, the same deals, and they are now pitted against each other. But they still very much like each other. They still very much have this sexual tension going, but now they hate each other because now they're enemies. And in true Christina Lauren fashion, it was sexy, it was funny, it was entertaining, it was full of pranks. It reminded me a lot of The Hating Game, actually. So I feel like if you like The Hating Game, you might like this. I love pretty much everything that I've read from Christina Lauren. I don't think I've ever rated one of their books low, and this is no exception. I still gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I had a fantastic time reading it. And those are all the books, the 5 books that I read in In May. Let's go ahead and talk about the 6 books that I read in June. I read so many things in these 3 months. This is such a long video. Have you taken a pee break yet? Do you still have your snack? Do you need a new snack? Did you get some water? Are you hydrated? I'm staying hydrated. All right, let's go. Let's get into June. The first book that I read in June was Girls on the Verge by Sharon Biggs Waller. This is a feminist novel about a teenage girl who finds out she's pregnant, doesn't want to be pregnant, and wants to seek an abortion. And the uphill, ridiculous battle that this girl has to go through to obtain autonomy over her own body. This 16-year-old girl from Texas, which is a very conservative state with not a lot of abortion clinics, women's health clinics available, and she goes on this journey just to reclaim her body from an experience that was kind of traumatizing for her. Enraged me that somebody who is already going through such a difficult time for reasons that really are no one else's business, the way that the government was involved and the way that parental consent is involved and all of the hoops she had to jump through. I was so upset reading this book. I can't believe that this is what real teens are going through. I just felt so much for Camille because obviously there are girls out there who are real people that Camille represents, and so I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So after that, the next book that I read was a audiobook, and that was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. One of my absolute favorite books of the entire year. This has been all over BookTube for like 2 years now. I finally got around to it. It is hyped for a good freaking reason because it is incredible. This is a story about Evelyn as she is telling her autobiography, her biographical account of the 7 husbands that she goes through in her lifetime and why she suddenly disappears from the limelight at the height of her career, and 30 years later is giving the inside scoop on everything that went down in her personal life and the reason behind the 7 husbands. It's a fantastic audiobook. Evelyn Hugo is one of my favorite characters of all time. She's not insanely likable. Like, she definitely is an unlikable main character. She makes a lot of bad decisions. She's very selfish, but her perseverance and her strength to continue and her will to go on and her struggle being a Cuban woman in the 1950s, 60s film industry was just an absolute joy to read about. I adored this book. I adored the audiobook, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in June was The Dark Calling by Chrisley Cole, which I think is the 6th book in the Arcana Chronicles. This is a YA new adult, I don't know, it blurs some lines, post-apocalyptic story about these characters who, after this apocalyptic event called The Flash, all starts to embody tarot card. Main character Evie is trying to beat out this centuries old player who has won the last several games, all by taking out her character in the past games. There is a really intense love triangle in the series. By this point, we've had some relationship developments that you would think would solidify one side of the love triangle over the other, but no, Evie is still as indecisive and wishy-washy as she's always been. And at this point, I really just think that the 3 characters should just be in a polyamorous relationship and just be together, all 3 of them. I feel like they would be happiest all 3 together. I just feel like Evie would be happier if she didn't have to pick either. The last several books in the series have been very heavily focused on the love triangle. I felt like this book gave us a lot more plot. We had a lot more progression. There were a lot more things happening, moving us towards an ending point. I do believe that there's only one more book left in the series, so it felt necessary that we move the plot forward to get to a place where we can conclude the story. There are still a lot of things that I have questions about. Still really enjoyed it, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Not my favorite in the series so far, but still a fun read. The next book that I read I listened to on audiobook, and that was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, which is their most recent release. This follows 2 characters who are the only 2 guests at this wedding who do not eat the seafood buffet and thus do not get food poisoning. And so our main female character, Olive, takes her twin sister's honeymoon package and takes the best man, who is her arch enemy, to Hawaii to pose as her sister and reap the benefits of this all-inclusive vacation. However, they have to pretend that they are on a honeymoon together and pretend that they're in love, and really they just hate each other. I love a good hate to love romance. It's probably my favorite relationship romance trope, and this was no different. Olive and Ethan were so much fun together. They were so witty. There was so much good banter. They had this amazing like sexual chemistry, but still like this hatred of one another, but really you could tell that they liked each other and that there was a lot of like miscommunication happening in the past between the two of them. I freaking love everything they write. I will read anything that they write. I will read everything they write from here until probably forever. I love their books. I love their characters. I love their writing. They're always engaging. They're always gripping. They're always a fun time. They're always funny. This was no exception, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The second to last book that I have to talk about is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This book I would be shocked if you haven't heard about. It's been all over book internet, everything. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Goodreads, you can't get away from this book. I absolutely loved it. I loved the side characters. I loved the whole world that Casey created, because it is an alternate like AU version of Earth where we would have had a woman president in 2016 rather than what happened in 2016. And if our woman president had a son that became close with the Prince of England, and what would have transpired from there. We follow Alex, who is the first son of the United States, and we follow Prince Henry, who is a Prince of England. They are enemies. They do not like each other. Alex is a guest at Henry's older sibling's wedding and destroys the wedding cake and creates a PR nightmare because the two are in the middle of a fight when it happens. So they are forced to pretend to be friends to help smooth over this, you know, international political drama disaster. They have the sweetest romance. I loved their storyline the best. There is a lot of political tangents and side stories in here, being that it is told from Alex's perspective as the first son. Get a lot of inner workings about politics and about campaigning. I'm not a huge fan of political dramas. That's really what took away from my enjoyment personally, is I would have liked more of just the romance and less of the political drama. I actually felt this book was a little on the long side. Ultimately, I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. And the final book I have to talk about today is The Bride Test by Helen Huang. I also listened to this book on audiobook, and this was another fantastic audiobook. This is the companion to The Kiss Quotient. We follow Michael from The Kiss Quotient's cousin, Kai, who also has autism, and he was a big proponent in how Michael discovered Stella's autism in the first book. We get to follow Kai's perspective, whose mom really just wants him to get married and settle down with a nice Vietnamese girl. So she flies to Vietnam and interviews a bunch of women and finds this woman named Esme and pays her way for her to come to the United States for a summer and live here and work in her restaurant and try to win over Kai's heart. It's totally an arrangement. Neither of them are really comfortable with it. I really liked being in Kai's head because his presentation of autism in this novel is very different from Stella's, and I really liked having a different perspective of a different main character dealing with the same diagnosis in a different way and how it presents differently. I just loved this book and I loved the relationship, and I might actually have preferred it to Kiss Quotient. I don't know. I might liked it just like a smidge bit more than The Kiss Quotient. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that is it. Those are all of the books that I read in April, May, and June. There were a ton. If you stuck around to the end, I give you thumbs up. Props. You did amazing. Thanks for sticking around and hanging out with me. I appreciate all the time you put into watching this. Tell me down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and let's chat about them. And thank you again for watching this video. I will talk to you very soon in a new one. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. I don't remember what my outro is. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'll talk to you very soon. There it is. Thank you. Bye-bye.